All right, we're back on the bass, and on the bass I want to review the pentatonic scale because we didn't really get into it at all today on the guitar, but it is part of what we learn to learn the chord scale, because the chord scale is a complete 7-note scale, and the pentatonic scale is only 5 notes. So when we play it in C, it's basically My Girl. That's a complete pentatonic scale in the key of C major. C, D, E, notice the slide, that's my little thing with the pentatonic scale. G, A, notice the hammer, that's my other little thing with the pentatonic scale. And C. So from a technique standpoint, the slide and the hammer work for you. This isn't the actual bass part to My Girl, but it sounds like My Girl. The actual bass part is... It is that higher G. I like the lower. They're both right. Yeah, this is the one on the record. So, also part of the pentatonic scale. Watch. Sometimes 2 notes are enough on the bass because the chords change. So then you end up changing anyway. For the chords, you don't have to change the line. Repetition is key for bass, as you probably know. All right, so keep this in mind too. With the bass, when you play a pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic is no different. The relative minor is no different because it simply starts with the ring finger. So if C is your first note in the C major, then you simply play the A that's before it with your ring finger to create the minor pentatonic. Comes out completely different than My Girl, doesn't it? Because it's minor notes. Even though it's the same notes, because the order is changed, it's minor. Now, with all that in mind, what we're going to do today is we're going to actually play a complete 7-note scale and base it on something we've already done, which is the pentatonic scale. Right now, the way we do the pentatonic scale is to use the technique of the slide and the hammer to complete the scale. But with an actual major scale, it's a different kind of technique. It's a fingering memorization technique. And it gets us to use our pinky, which we don't get to use much, and we don't use it in the pentatonic scale unless we end with it. So this scale allows us to not only use it, but to stretch it. And so the way it works is a pointer, ring, which is always going to be 2 frets away because it's 2 fingers away, and stretch pinky. So that's a little different than the way we played My Girl before. Same notes, but different approach. Right? That's because I'm trying to get you to memorize the fingering. You go to the next string, and you do the same thing. See how that works? That's 6 notes out of a 7-note scale, so we did pretty well. So, to play a major scale in any key, pointer, ring, stretch pinky, pointer, ring, stretch pinky. It's an unorthodox scale fingering, okay? No question about it. But it gets your pinky to stretch, right? And it gets you to play scales without knowing what note you're playing, because it doesn't matter if the fingering's right. You're going to be playing the right notes. On the bass, it's cool. All right, finally, at the end, we go pointer to ring. Now, that's not a major scale. That goes along with the chord scale we learn on the guitar. B flat to C. The major scale would be middle to ring. Okay? I want to touch on the chord scale because if you're playing bass to those chords that we played today, you're playing C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B flat, and C. Now, I was looking at you the whole time because I didn't have to look because the fingering was exactly the same. Pointer, ring, stretch pinky. Pointer, ring, stretch pinky. Pointer, ring. Easy as it gets. And actually really good for you because of stretching the pinky. Something you need to try to do on the bass because you get more notes that way out of the deal. Right? And so now let's talk about a major scale that's played correctly. And I don't mean fingering wise because we all have our opinion when it comes to fingering. I give my fingering exercises to people as an alternative to the traditional way of playing a scale to get their fingers to exercise. But it also really works in terms of being able to play these scales without having to look. And I think that's important because not only is your pinky going to stretch then, so you're going to have sort of more fingering available than your hand would normally allow, but also you're going to be real aware of fret distance. That's something that's really important on the bass because as we know, it gets smaller as we get up higher on the bass. So the more you can do without looking, the better. Anyway, whatever the case may be, the real major scale. Pointer, ring, pinky. Pointer, ring, pinky, middle, ring. Notice I don't even use finger numbers because I try to keep numbers out of this. It's math. You know, I'm trying to use finger names that you called your fingers when you were a kid, and some of you might be kids, because I want you to think of it as a finger, not as a number. Same with notes. I don't want you to think of it as a number. I want you to think of it as a letter or a fret, right? And that's a C major scale. That's something every bass player should practice, but most bass teachers aren't going to show you that fingering. The reason I show you that fingering is because now you can play a G major scale too, or you can play an A flat major scale. I don't have to look because the fingering is always the same. Major scale, done. Okay, pointer, ring, stretch pinky, repeat, middle, ring, done. Okay, now going backwards, descending major scale. A little different because if you've memorized your fingering, it's not going to help you going backwards, right? So keep that in mind, and that's not an assignment. Your assignment is to simply do the C major scale. Forward. And also, if you could play the pentatonic. Right? That's a bass line. You can hear it. It's like your Mama Do dance. Which is kind of a 50s style bass line. But once again, the micro thing, more 60s. And try to use your slide, hammer, vibrato, as much as you can. All right, so enjoy that for your bass lesson, and piano's coming next. Okay, as promised, a little two-handed work today. So my right hand is on C with the thumb, pointer on D, middle on E, F is fourth finger, G is pinky. Same with the left hand except in reverse, pinky on C. Ring, middle on E, as in both hands, and F and G. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play in the right hand the first 5 notes of the C major scale. Now it's ascending and descending, up and down, right? That's a perfect right hand exercise. It also happens to be a perfect left hand exercise. Both hands as well. And vocal. La 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 la. La 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 la. So as far as routine goes and any kind of classical borrowing that I may do, that's the best one, and it's really basic. It also reminds us that chords are made with pinky, middle, and thumb with the left hand and the right hand. Pretty basic. So what I'm going to do now is kind of mess it up a little bit. This thumb in my right hand is going to be replaced by my pinky in my right hand. And the middle replaces, and the pointer replaces, and the thumb replaces. And now we have an octave C chord. We talked about that many times for the piano, that if you can make the stretch and the left hand's playing the low C with it. Okay. If you can't make the stretch, then what we did earlier is fine, and you can play the low C with that. See, it sounds pretty close to the octave. The octave's just a little more developed. Stretch pinky, right? That's my thing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put my pinky on this note because I'm going to be going up the C major scale. But not only with my left hand, with my right hand chords. I mentioned Bill Withers in the guitar section. He also did this great Lean On Me introduction. What you just heard right there was the flatted 7th chord, B flat, coming back to the 4 chord. So we're going to be talking about that today. Right? So what are these chords? C, D minor, E minor, and D minor. The 2 and the 3. We talked about the C, F, and the G, the 1, 4, and 5. We talked about the A minor, the 6 minor. Now we have the 2 and 3 minor with Lean On Me. So here it is, the beginning of our C major chord scale. Lean On Me. Back down we go. Now, it's not a B diminished, it's a G. It's inverted though, so that we have B octaves to hear that nice melody. Lean on me. Yeah, I love Bill Withers, and in the earlier part of the lesson, the guitar lesson, we talked about Ain't No Sunshine, Lean On Me, another classic. But it's interesting because both of these songs illustrate to a large degree what I'm talking about, which is the relationship between the chords in a particular key. And thus I use chord scales to create sort of an understanding of those relationships. So C, D minor, E minor, F. On piano, there's no question about the fingering, right? Whatever you can actually muster. G is number 5. A minor is number 6. We talked about those last week. B flat is number 7. That's the 7th note of the C major scale flatted to create a chord we can actually use. The B flat's a black key, yes, but the other 2 are the white keys that are adhering to the scale. But the B flat's so much more usable. And back to C. Now, on the piano, probably the best use of this chord scale was the very end of Let It Be by the Beatles. It starts with an F chord, but not in root position like you see here. It's inverted. And the bass is played in octaves, right? F, E minor, D minor, C, B flat, A minor, G, F, and then what key are we in? C. So, for the piano, the first chord scale is C major, and it ends up being a chord scale we can use for a multitude of songs, not just the 2 mentioned today. So let's illustrate it in its completion. I'm playing left-hand octaves. You can't see the lower octave, but you'll hear it. It's the right hand that really matters on this because we know that the left-hand note is going to be, left-hand notes are going to be the same as the right-hand chords. So C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B flat, and C. So this is perhaps the most unorthodox part of what I teach, the idea that you would flat the 7th tone. But there is a C scale that does that. It's called a Mixolydian scale. And it's really an F scale. As I mentioned before, Let It Be almost seemed like an F scale, right? In an F scale, you have F, G, A, you have B flat, C, D, and E. So those are the same notes we were dealing with. But when you start on C, you're starting on the 5th note of an F scale. And that's a mode called Mixolydian. So it really does qualify as a scale. It's just a modal scale. So jazz people know what that's about. Now you rock and rollers can use the Mixolydian scale as a way to remind yourself of that funky 7 that actually ends up being flatted so that it can be used more for the kind of music that we're trying to play. Rock, pop, soul, country. You know what I'm talking about. All right. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed it. All right. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.